Hello again, my fellow pilots and my fellow aircraft maintenance personnel. Your host is always Haitham Ali, and I'm an aviation technical instructor. What is the difference between standard setting, QFE, and QNH? What is the difference between different altimeter settings, which is a standard setting, 1013, QFE, and QNH? Let's start about the definition of the altimeter. Let's start with the definition of the altimeter. What is the altimeter, everybody? Altimeter, everybody, is a static pressure gauge. Is a static pressure reading gauge that is calibrated to show us vertical distance. Again, the altimeter is a static pressure gauge that calibrated to show us vertical distance. Why, Haitham, you are not telling to show us altitude? Yes, this is a good question. Altimeter may show altitude only if the pressure setting is QNH. But if the pressure setting, altimeter pressure setting, is QFE, the altimeter will show us height. And if the altimeter pressure setting is standard setting, which is 1013, the altimeter will show us pressure altitude, or what it called the flight level. So the altimeter may show us three indications. Not only altitude is one of the three, but also maybe height, maybe flight level or pressure altitude. Is the altimeter can show us true altitude, which is the vertical distance of the aeroplane from the ground? No. True altitude is related to the not pressure altimeters. It's related to radio altimeters. True altitude is related to radio altimeter or radio altitude. It is not related to pressure altitudes. And in my next session, in another session, I will talk about the radio altimeters and radio altitude and what is the difference between radio altitude and the pressure altitude. All of these three settings, standard setting, QFE, QNH, is a pressure setting for the pressure altimeters. Okay, everybody? So again, if we need to describe the pressure altimeter, it is a static pressure reading gauge, okay, that is calibrated to show us vertical distance. This vertical distance may be altitude if the altimeter pressure setting is QNH, related to mean sea level. And this altimeter may show us height if the pressure setting is QFE. Okay? And the altimeter will show us flight level or pressure altitude if the pressure setting is a standard setting, which is 1013. Now the altimeter can show us flight level, what it called the flight level, related to pressure altitude. So standard setting QFE and QNH may be denoted or differentiated by standard setting show a pressure altitude or related to pressure altitude. QFE related to height. And the QNH related to altitude. QNH related to altitude, everybody. Okay, so all of these three are related to pressure altimeters, everybody. And you as a pilot in a modern airliner, you may change over between these three settings. If you are flying in premises of the airport or in a larger circle, or you already pass the transition altitude and your main concern is the vertical separation between you and other traffic. So in that case, you need the altimeter to show us or to show you flight level. QFE and the QNH when you are near the land. okay, near the land. If you are very near to the airport or you're outside of the airport, approach and landing. So in that case, you will maneuver between QNH and QFE, QNH and QFE. Okay, everybody? So, the standard setting is the altimeter pressure setting that will show a vertical distance, which is a pressure altitude or a flight level. That will happen when 1013 hectopascal is set on the subscale. The altimeter reading is called the pressure altitude, everybody. If 1013 hectopascal is set, an aircraft would normally fly flight levels. When you need to fly flight level after you pass transition altitude. So in that case, the main concern is the vertical separation between you and the other traffic. Okay, everybody? So a flight level is the aircraft height above 1013 hectopascal, isobar 1013 hectopascal, expressed in hundreds of feet. And the altimeter will show us flight level in that case. Flight level only occur at 500 feet interval. Example, when you say flight level 45, it is flight level or 4,500 feet. Or when you say flight level 360, it is 36,000 feet of a pressure altitude. Pressure altitude in that case. Okay, everybody? Pressure altitude. Okay, this is a standard setting. And the altimeter in that case will show us flight level or pressure altitude. Next pressure setting, altimeter pressure setting, is QFE. QFE. QFE is related to the isobar at the airport elevation. When you put the pressure setting QFE, okay, everybody, QFE, and you land on the airport, the altimeter will show us 0 feet or 0 height. And the QFE is the pressure setting when it is calibrated to the altimeter will show us height. What is height? It is the vertical distance between the moving part, which is the aircraft, and the airport field elevation, runway or taxiway, airport. So QFE is the aerodrome level pressure. Again, QFE is the aerodrome level pressure, which when set on the subscale will cause the altimeter of an aircraft on the ground to read 0, assuming there is no instrument error. In flight with QFE set, the altimeter will show us or will indicate height. QFE related to height. QFE related to height. Okay, everybody? So again, in flight with QFE set, the altimeter will indicate height above the aerodrome. QFE reference data, provided either condition exists between aerodrome level and the aircraft and no altimeter errors present. In practice, QFE is used mainly for circuit flying in general aviation pilot training and gives a good indication of heights above the aerodrome. Any errors involved being only small. So always the pilot in training that will do circuits, flight circuits or circuit flying around the airport, it's better to calibrate the altimeter at QFE and allow the altimeter to show height in that case, vertical distance to be height. And the QFE is the pressure setting that when the aircraft is on ground, the altimeter will read 0 because you are on the ground. Okay, everybody, on the ground. QFE again related to height. QFE related to height. Standard setting related to pressure altitude or flight level. And the third pressure setting, everybody, is QNH. It is the pressure setting related to the mean sea level. And when the altimeter pressure setting is at QNH, the altimeter will show altitude. Altitude. And this is a mistake that many pilots go into. They assume that the altimeter only show altitude. No, altimeter may show altitude only if the setting is QNH, and it will show height if the altimeter setting is QFE, and will show pressure altitude or flight level when the altimeter setting is standard setting or 1013 or 1013 everybody. So let's describe QNH. QNH is the pressure setting equivalent to mean sea level calculated by air traffic control from the aerodrome level pressure, assuming either condition prevail between aerodrome level and the mean sea level. With QNH set on the subscale, the altimeter of an aircraft on the aerodrome indicate aerodrome elevation. So if the altimeter pressure setting is QNH and you land on the aerodrome, the altimeter will show the airport field elevation. Airport field elevation, not show 0. It will only show 0 if the field elevation of the airport is 0 feet. But if the field elevation of the airport may be 270, maybe 1,000, maybe 7,000, on ground, the altimeter will show the field elevation of the airport. Again, with QNH set on the subscale, the altimeter of an aircraft on the aerodrome indicate aerodrome elevation. And if QNH is setting, the altimeter in flight will show aircraft altitude. Okay, everybody, what is elevation? That is the height above mean sea level if there is no instrument error. In flight, the altimeter will indicate the altitude. QNH, altitude. QNH, altitude. QFE, height. QFE, height. Standard setting 1013, pressure altitude. Standard setting 1013, flight level. Okay, everybody? Okay, so, but this will only be the true altitude if the mean temperature in the column of air beneath the aircraft is the same as an ISA condition, assuming there are no other altimeter errors. True altitude, everybody, as I told you, normally related to radio altimeter, not pressure altimeter. If conditions are different from standard, the indicated altitude, sometimes called the QNH altitude, may deviate considerably from the altitude. The navigational computer can be used to make an approximate correction for this temperature error. Okay, everybody, so now we understand well what is the difference between standard setting, altimeter setting, QFE altimeter setting, and the QNH altimeter setting. All of these three are related to pressure altimeters. Pressure altimeters that use the static pressure source to indicate pressure and to indicate altitude, height, or pressure altitude or flight level. Okay, everybody, thank you always for your good listening, and always fly safely and maintain your aircraft very safely. From Cairo, Egypt, your host was Haytham Ali, and I'm an aviation technical instructor. Please stay tuned for an upcoming sessions like this to discuss aircraft systems for my fellow pilots and my fellow aircraft maintenance. Thank you always, and goodbye.